I knew I forgot something. Hey guys, can everybody hear me? It's very possible that I'm having tech difficulties. Or that I'm just messing something up. Okay, good, you can hear me? Hello! Welcome everybody! How's everybody doing? Oh, I'm sorry if I seem sunburned. I was at Six Flags over the weekend. Oh my god. Also, I was, I think, a minute or two late because I wanted tea. I realized I didn't have tea at the last second before going live, and I was like, no. Yeah, it is the second stream ever, so I'm still, like, figuring out how this stuff works, so... But today should be a pretty chill stream, so hopefully there is less for me to mess up. Can everybody hear the rain, or is the rain too quiet, or too loud? Because I can turn it down. I wanted to have rain in the background, because what's a mystery story without, like, the dark and stormy atmosphere? Hello! Rain is audible. Okay. I'll adjust it if it starts giving us any issues. Yeah. Rain sounds nice. I hear the rain. Okay, good. Yeah. So, fun story. Here in Atlanta, we've been having rain, like, every day for, like, a week. We've been having so much rain. Oh, yeah, sorry. I forgot to explain the rain. The rain is, I have it on in the background. What have we been listening to it on? I want to give credit to them. This Meditation Relax Club. It's just, like, 10 hours of rain sounds. I wanted it for the background because, yeah, so so we've been having rain, like, every single day here in Atlanta, because the rain, like, weather is really unpredictable in Atlanta, especially this time of year. And I was like, ooh, maybe when I'm on live, I'll get rain sounds so we can, like, read a little, like, Nancy Drew mystery in the rain, and it'll be all cozy. And then we got no rain today. It's, like, the only day in the past, like, 4 days that we haven't had just a gigantic thunderstorm. It does sometimes kind of sound like bacon, right? That same sort of thing. But here's basically what we're doing today, if anybody's confused, because this is kind of a proof of concept, I guess you could say. I have mentioned previously in the past that I really love books and reading, and I've always wanted to cover books on the channel, and it doesn't really fit with the format of, like, the, oh my god, typical videos, that, like, I can't just make, like, a normal video like the ones that I make and have it paste really well, so I thought maybe we could do some streams, because I'm actually really into watching streams of other people read. I find it really calming, and I know a lot of people find this channel's content to be something that they watch when they just want to chill. So I thought maybe we could try doing, like, a reading stream, just, like, really chill, and see if we like reading streams, and if we do, then we can do more of them. If we don't ever have to do this again. We can just pretend it never happened. Hey, Anton! So yeah, I've got some rain sounds going. I'm gonna read... If this book looks huge, it's because it's technically 3 Nancy Drew stories all together. It's Secret of the Old Clock, and then there's also the Bungalow Mystery and the Mystery of the 99 Steps. But 99 steps. Why couldn't I say that correctly? But yeah, so I just want to try to read Secret of the Old Clock. I don't know if we'll get through all of it, but if we don't, we could always come back. But yeah, just thought we could do, like, a chill stream. I'm obviously not gonna... I don't want to do, like, a bootleg audiobook by accident, so I'm gonna do what I do with any media, which is I'm gonna read pieces, and then we can talk about it, like we're all in a little book club. Hey, Laser125. I'll be reading aloud, I promise. Yeah. How funny would it be if I was like, I'm gonna read? You guys can do whatever you're gonna do. No, I'm gonna be reading it aloud. You used to have this cover as a kid? Yeah, there's been several, I don't know, editions, I guess, of especially these. Secret of the Old Clock, if you don't know, I think everybody knows. It's the first Nancy Drew book that was ever published in 1930. So, yeah, last stream we were talking about Cuphead, which takes place in 1930. Now we're reading a book from actual 1930, so... it would be very funny if I was just like, I get to read this book. You guys can read of your own volition. If you've got a copy of the book, Avery ASMR, oh my gosh. I am sorry. If I'm tapping a lot, it's because I do that when I'm fidgety, which is all the time. So yeah, I'm gonna read, because this book the chapters are short. So I can read a chapter and then we can discuss. Yeah, most of these chapters are between like 8 and 10 pages tops. The whole book is not very long at all. So, yeah. Video is about 5 seconds behind the audio. I'm not sure how to fix that. Let me see. I used to have like 3 of the books. Don't know how or why, but people keep getting that one for me. Yeah. I've been meaning to. I've thought about like dissecting, because I have a couple like secondary copies of some of these books. So I was like, maybe I could dissect it and like wallpaper like one of these walls back here, but yeah, Nancy Drew is honestly kind of an obsession with me. I've always loved Nancy Drew. To this day, I just think Nancy Drew is a great character. We need Spencer in the house. Text Spencer. Let me see if he knows. Who's making waffles? That sounds great. R.L. Stine Fear Street was my escape. Did anybody read the R.L. Stine, the Goosebumps, like the Choose Your Own Adventure ones? Those were the ones that I used to always like borrow from the library. I won many a like summer reading challenge with those books. Cameron's the one who made waffles. That is amazing. Are they regular waffles or are they like chocolate chip or blueberry? I'm very curious. Sorry, I'm just asking questions about the waffles now. Texting tech support. Yeah, the Choose Your Own Adventure books were one of my favorite things. You remember watching the Nancy Drew movie while waiting for the next Spider-Man 3 in IMAX showing? Is it the one with Emma Roberts playing Nancy? There was another one with Maggie Lawson playing Nancy, but I think that was just a TV movie. Chocolate chip waffles, yes! Yeah, I watched that movie religiously when I was younger. Loved that movie. Yeah, so yeah. Once we get the tech supported, I'll get into this book, but I encourage you, if you want to get a drink or your own copy of the book, if you want to read along with me, feel free. Ooh, chocolate chip waffles with whipped cream sounds good. Yeah, the Emma Roberts Nancy Drew movie was in theaters. There was another one starring Maggie Lawson as Nancy Drew. If you don't know, she's the one who... She was Juliet in Psych. She played Nancy Drew. I'm pretty sure that was just a TV movie. I could be wrong. I'm getting a tech support update. Okay, I'm gonna try something. Okay. Click. I'm still trying to figure out OBS. It's like I've used it for screen cap all this time, but I've just started using it to stream, so it's like super confusing to me anyway. I have no idea what movie I watched, but I watched the movie. That's how I feel like Come back. That's how I feel about, like, half the things that I cover on this channel. I believe in you. Thank you. Yeah, we've been getting a ton of rain here. Just, like, on and off, just, like, thunderstorms out of nowhere. Is the delay on the audio any better than it was? Did I do it? Did I fix it? Looks synced. Okay, that's good. That's good. Not seeing a delay. Okay, that's good. We might be good. Yeah, Atlanta has this thing where, like, you can never predict our weather, especially in this time, like springtime. You could have, like, super, well, not anymore. Now we're getting just straight up into having, like, 85-degree weather every day. But, like, we can have, like, especially during March and April, we'll have, like, days in, like, the 50-degree mark or a little lower, which is very cold to us here. And then we'll have, like, not at all, like, super hot days in the 80s, and you never know what you're gonna get. Okay, I'm glad that the sink is sinking for now. One day it's hot, the next day you need... Yeah, it's weird, right? It's like, I'm so jealous of, like, my family that lives in like, Florida or people that I know in California. They're like, yeah, it's the same. Like, we have pretty consistent weather most of the time, and I'm like, what's that like? It must be really nice. It's gonna be May. Cue Justin Timberlake singing. Alright, is everybody ready to get into it? Are we excited? I apologize, by the way, if I stumble a little bit reading. I'm a pretty competent reader, but I definitely get, like, nervous on live, so... Their spring just arrived, I'm already done with it and ready for fall. The spring allergies have just been brutal. I'm so excited. Okay, I'm excited too. I hope we like reading streams. I love reading. Here in Texas too, March and April should keep a jacket. Yeah, it feels like we get different seasons depending on where in the day we are. You know what I mean? Over the weekend I was at Six Flags, and in the morning we were, like, worried that it was gonna be a washout with, like, the rain. It was super overcast, and then, like, nothing, like, all the clouds went away, and it was 80-something degrees, and it was... Of course, nobody was wearing sunscreen, because nobody thought about it, because it was looking like it was all rain, so... yeah. Never read a Nancy Drew, so this is an experience. Yeah, so Nancy Drew books are... Like, the one that we're reading is literally from 1930, so they're kind of hilariously outdated in a lot of ways. There's a lot of, detectives that will look at Nancy and be like, what, a woman? A girl? How do you know how to solve crime? And it's very funny. So it's like, it's, it can be very funny, but they're just very, like, calming. If that, like, I wanted to start with these because, one, I just wanted to do more Nancy Drew content. I'm planning on, I don't think I've announced this yet, but I'm pretty soon going to do a cover of Nancy Drew Message in a Haunted Mansion, which is a video game. If you guys remember when I used to cover those PC games for Nancy Drew. And then I want to start kind of streaming my way through all of the, like, playing the games from number 1 in the series all the way through, because I own all of them on stream. So we're going into the Nancy Drew era a little bit, so I thought this would be a good way to start. And this is a really, it's a really, like, calming book series, so if we like this, we can always, I own a lot of Nancy Drew books, so we can always do more, or just stream other children's books that we're nostalgic about. Yeah, Nancy Drew, depending on the person who was writing Nancy Drew at the time, she'll be somewhere between 16 and 19 years old. Sometimes she's just unspecified as a teenager, but she's pretty much never high school age. So, like, she's in that, like, in between. Like, she's old enough to be out of high school, but she's still a teenager, so. They were surprised because this was right after women were invented. Exactly. They were just like, we've never seen one of these before. So excited, I've been interested in the Nancy Drew games since the movie. Yeah, so it's a great, I love the Nancy Drew PC games. They're really, I think they're going to be really fun to solve on stream because they're puzzle games, so, like, there are going to be times when I need the chat's help to solve puzzles, so. I have never read Echo Falls. I've heard about it a little bit. Gosh golly gee, a woman solving mystery. Literally exactly, like, I haven't read this particular book in a very long time, but I believe that we're going to see some of that, and I'm sure it's going to be hilarious. Female detectives never get any respect. Velma and Daphne pull the weight in Mystery Incorporated, but no one... Yeah, exactly. Like, it's so funny. And Nancy Drew, in pretty much every iteration, she's always chill. She's like, yeah. Yeah, what are you gonna do about it? I just solved your mystery. Shout out to Noah, by the way. Not to put you on the spot, but shout out. Noah went through and watched all 175 videos that I've ever posted and made sure to give me a list of all of the fake band names that I've ever suggested, which is amazing. I appreciate that so much. As a kid, I thought people were just rude to her because of her age, but now I'm like, oh dang, yeah, people are jerks. Yeah, props to her dad. He's usually, like, supportive, at least in most iterations, I think. But yeah, people can be real mean to Nancy. So yeah, thank you guys all for being here. I really appreciate it. I'll have to check out Echo Falls. That's really, sounds really interesting. Has anybody read, sorry, I'm gonna start reading in a second, I promise. Has anybody read, the Secret series by Pseudonymous Bosch? That was one of my favorites as a kid, too. Glad you appreciate it. It was honestly so fun. I'm glad it was fun. I'm glad that it was not horrible to have to listen to 175 videos of me talking. I really appreciate you. Okay, I'm gonna get into the book. I'm gonna read the first chapter and break to discuss, and then we'll just keep going and see how far in this book we get tonight. Her dad's pretty trill. He's only worried about her safety, which is, like, sometimes Nancy puts herself in dangerous situations. Yeah, like, it's so, I always laugh. There's one part early on in the game series where she's like, she writes a letter home to her dad, and she's like, I'm off to solve a murder, bye, peace. And then it's just like, her poor dad. Can you imagine? My teenage child is like going toe-to-toe with a serial killer. Secret Self-Respect. No, there's a book series called The Secret Series. It's by Pseudonymous Bosch, which is... I don't think it's really a spoiler. It's sort of like Lemony Snicket, where that's a fictional character in the book who's credited with writing the book. Yeah, so that's a really fun series that not a lot of people talk about, honestly. I love it. It centers around synesthesia, which I have, so represent. Never read the A to Z mysteries. I'll have to try that too. Okay, for real, I'm gonna get into reading, and then I'll catch myself back up on the chat once I'm done with this chapter, if everybody's settled in. Okay. Nancy Drew, The Secret of the Old Clock. The cover for this collection is the cover for The Secret of the Old Clock. If everybody can see. It's Nancy tinkering with the clock. I'm pretty sure there's a black and white version of that picture somewhere in this book when the scene comes up. By Caroline Keene, who is not a real person, but a collection of ghostwriters. I think it's the same thing with the Hardy Boys. I'm pretty sure that was a collection of ghostwriters too. I believe women do make up a majority of true crime audiences. That's true. You're looking at a pretty big true crime viewer. Okay. Alright. Chapter 1. The Rescue. Nancy Drew, an attractive girl of 18, was driving home along a country road in her new dark blue convertible. She had just delivered some legal papers to her father. It was sweet of old Dad to give me this car for my birthday, she thought, and it's fun to help him in his work. Her father, Carson Drew, a well-known lawyer in their hometown of River Heights, frequently discussed puzzling aspects of cases with his blonde, blue-eyed daughter. Smiling, Nancy said to herself, Dad depends on my intuition. An instant later, she gasped in horror. From the lawn of a house just ahead of her, a little girl of about 5 years of age had darted into the roadway. A van turning out of the driveway of the house was barely 50 feet away from her. As the driver vigorously sounded the horn in warning, the child became confused and ran directly in front of the van. Miraculously, the little girl managed to cross the road safely and pull herself up onto a low wall which formed one side of a bridge. But the next second, as the van sped away, the child lost her balance and toppled off the wall and out of sight. "Oh my goodness!" Nancy cried, slamming on her brakes. She had visions of the child plunging into the water below, perhaps striking her head fatally on a rock. Nancy leaped out of her car and dashed across the road. This is getting very intense very quickly. Nancy leaped out of her car and dashed across the road. At the foot of the embankment, she could see a curly-haired little girl lying motionless, the right side of her body in the water. I hope, Nancy dared not complete the harrowing thought as she climbed down the steep slope. When she reached the child, she saw, to her great relief, that the little girl was breathing normally and no water had entered her nose and mouth. A quick examination showed that she had suffered no broken bones. Gently, Nancy lifted the little girl and, holding her firmly in both arms, struggled to the top of the embankment. Then she hurried across the road and up the driveway to the child's house. At this moment, the front door flew open and an elderly woman rushed out crying, "Judy! Judy!" There's a picture. I don't know how well everybody can see, but there's the truck. There's the truck. And that's Nancy in her car. And that's the little girl falling off of a bridge. It's getting very, very intense very quickly. "I'm sure she'll be all right," said Nancy quickly. The woman, seeing Nancy's car, asked excitedly, "Did you run into her?" No, Judy fell off the bridge." It's not better, Nancy. Nancy quickly explained. Nancy quickly explained what had taken place. By this time, another woman, slightly younger, had hurried from the house. "Our baby! What's happened to her?" As the woman reached to take Judy, Nancy said soothingly, "Judy's gonna be all right. I'll carry her into the house and lay her on a couch." One of the women opened the screen door and the other directed this way. Nancy carried her little burden through a hallway and into a small, old-fashioned living room. Poor Judy. As soon as she laid the child on the couch, Judy began to murmur and turn her head from side to side. "I believe she'll come to in a few minutes," said Nancy. The two women watched Judy intently as they introduced themselves as Edna and Mary Turner, great aunts of the little girl. "Judy lives with us," explained Edna, the older sister. "We're bringing her up." Nancy was somewhat surprised to hear that these elderly women were rearing such a small child. She gave her name and address just as Judy opened her eyes and looked around. Seeing Nancy, she asked, "Who are you?" "My name is Nancy. I'm glad to know you, Judy." "Did you see me fall?" Nancy nodded as the child's aunt, Mary, said, "She rescued you from the river after you fell in." Judy began to cry. "I'll never, never run into the road again. Really, I won't," she told her aunts. Nancy said she was sure that Judy would never. She patted the child, who smiled up at her. Though Nancy felt that Judy would be all right, she decided to stay a few minutes longer to see if she could be of help. The child's wet clothes were removed and a robe put on her. Mary Turner started for the kitchen door. "I'd better get some medication and some wet compresses for Judy. She's getting a good-sized lump on her head. Nancy, will you come with me?" She led the way to the kitchen and headed for a first aid cabinet, which hung on the wall. "I want to apologize to you, Nancy, for thinking you hit Judy," the woman said. "I guess Edna and I lost our heads. You see, Judy is very precious to us. We brought up her mother, who had been an only child and was orphaned when she was little. The same thing happened to Judy. Her parents were killed in a boat explosion 3 years ago. The poor little girl had no close relatives except Edna and me." I'm sorry. Boat explosion. That's terrible. That's so terrible. Okay. Judy looked very healthy and happy, Nancy said quickly. "So I'm sure she must love it here." Mary smiled. "We do the best we can on our small income. Sometimes it just doesn't suffice, though. We sold some old furniture to the two men that were in the van you saw. I don't know who they were, but I guess the price was all right." Mary Turner's thoughts went back to the little Judy. "She's so little now that Edna and I are able to manage with our small income, but we worry about the future. We're dressmakers, but our fingers aren't so nimble with the needle as they used to be. To tell you the truth, Nancy, at the time Judy's parents were killed, Edna and I wondered whether we would be able to take care of Judy properly. But we decided to try it, and now we wouldn't part with her for anything in the world. She's won our hearts completely." Nancy was touched by the story. She knew what was in the minds of the Turner sisters. Living costs would become higher, and with the advancing years, their own income would become lower. "Unfortunately," Mary went on, "Judy's parents left very little money, but they were extremely bright people, and Judy's going to be like them. She ought to study music and dancing and have a college education, but I'm afraid we'll never be able to give her those things," Nancy said reassuringly. "Judy may be able to win a scholarship or get other financial aid." Mary, finding Nancy a sympathetic listener, continued, "A cousin of our father's named Josiah Crowley used to help us, but he passed away a couple of months ago. For years he used to pay us long visits and was very, very generous with his money." Miss Turner sighed. "He always promised to remember us in his will. He loved little Judy, and I'm afraid Edna and I came to depend on that in our plans for her, but he did not carry out his promise." Nancy smiled understandingly and made no comment, but she did wonder why Mr. Crowley had changed his mind. "Josiah went to live with some other cousins. After that, things changed. He rarely came to see us. But he was here just last February and said the same thing, that Edna and I were to inherit money from him. He had always helped us, and it seemed strange that he should stop so suddenly. Mary Turner looked at Nancy. Maybe you know our well-to-do cousins that he went to stay with. They live in River Heights. They're the Richard Tophams. Do they have 2 daughters named Ada and Isabel? Nancy asked. If so, I know them. That's the family, all right, replied Mary. Nancy detected a hint of coolness in the woman's voice. Do you like these 2 girls? Miss Turner asked. Nancy did not answer at once. She had been taught to never gossip. But finally she said tactfully, Ada and Isabel were in high school with me. They were never my close friends. We, didn't see eye to eye on various topics. But this time Mary Turner had selected a few items from the first aid chest. Now she went to the refrigerator for some ice cubes. As she arranged the various articles on a tray, she said, Well, when Cousin Josiah passed away, to our amazement, Richard Topham produced a will, which made him executor of the Crowley estate and left him all the money. And left all the money to him, his wife, and the 2 girls. Yes, I did read that in the newspaper, Nancy recalled. Is the estate a large one? I understand that there's considerable money in it, Mary Turner replied. Some of Josiah's other cousins say that he told them the same thing he told us, and they're planning to go to court about the matter. The woman shrugged, but I guess a fight to break the will would be hopeless. Nevertheless, Edna and I cannot help feeling there must be a later will, although as yet no one has produced it. Nancy followed Miss Turner into the living room. The cold compress helped to reduce the swelling where Judy had hit her head on a rock. Convinced now that the little girl was all right, Nancy said she must leave. Come to see me again soon, Judy spoke up. I like you, Nancy. You're my saving girl. You bet I'll come, Nancy answered. I like you too. You're a good sport. The child's great aunts profusely thanked Nancy again for rescuing Judy. The visitor had barely reached the front door when Edna suddenly said, Mary, where's our silver teapot? Why, right there on the tea table. Oh, it's gone. Edna ran to the dining room. The silver candlesticks, they're gone too. Nancy had paused in the doorway, startled. Do you mean the pieces have been stolen? She asked. They may have been, replied Mary Turner, who was white with apprehension. By those men who bought furniture from us. Instantly, Nancy thought of the men in the van. Who were the men? She asked. Oh, Mary, how could we have been so careless? Edna Turner wailed. We don't know who the men were. They just knocked on the door and asked if we had any old furniture that we wanted to sell. We'll never get the silver back. Maybe you will, said Nancy. I'll call the police. Oh, dear, Mary said woefully. Our phone is out of order. Then I'll try to catch up to the van, Nancy declared. What did the men look like? They were short and heavy-set. One had dark hair, the other light. They had kind of large noses. That's about all I noticed. Pretty poor description of people who stole stuff, but alright. Me too, said Edna. With a hasty goodbye, Nancy dashed from the house and ran to her car. End chapter 1. So, how are we feeling? I'm catching up on the chat. Velma does carry the whole team in Mystery Incorporated. So yeah, what do we have so far? Thinking of Jasper and Horace with those 2 in the van. Yeah, they're kind of just nondescript burglars right now, because the women didn't really remember much about how they looked, I guess. It's not raining where I am. I have like artificial rain playing to give it that dark and stormy vibe to read. Hello, Jason. Yeah, so we have a girl who, in the first, 2 seconds, a child almost dies. Nancy saves her life, and then stumbles into this weird, dispute over a will and finances, Nice to listen to during work. Oh, that makes me happy. The estate in today's money is worth $1. Yeah, in the game, at least, they say his estate was worth over $250,000, and everybody's like, oh, $250,000, which is, I would like to have $250,000, but that was worth much more in 1930. It's always over some damn will. Yeah. Poor women. Yeah, so these women have a relation who offered to help them financially, and then he went off to live with some distant relatives who have, like, this random will that nobody else has seen or heard of that swears up and down that they get all the money. So, very shady. But yeah, can we talk about how violent this first chapter was? The writers of this book were like, yeah, in the first 2 seconds, a child's about to die, and then we're gonna say that her parents died in a boat explosion. That is so horrifying. Heffalumps and woozles ran. Good, that's what I'm going for. This made doing the dishes a lot more fun. I'm so glad. I'm so sorry you have to do dishes. So yeah, first chapter. Not a whole lot. I like the shade that Nancy kind of threw at the two girls, the Topham sisters. It's like Nancy, like you get the impression that they bullied Nancy in high school, and you're just like, poor Nancy. I hope Nancy gets the last laugh on these girls. You gotta catch the reader's attention somehow. So Nancy Drew started being published right in 1930, which was right when the Depression hit, which they kind of allude to without saying it when Nancy says things like, living costs are gonna get harder, things like that. Yeah, yikes, one chapter in. And the books, while a lot of other books stopped being printed because they just couldn't turn a profit because nobody had money to just throw around on books in the Depression, they honestly sold off shelves because of how, like, refreshingly new the Nancy Drew stories were to people at the time, which I think is great. This book goes so hard, so bad. It really does. I'm just gonna jump right into the second chapter if everybody's cool, because I think that's the best mode to get through. Also, isn't it cute how the kid said, "You're my saving girl" to Nancy? Like, that's just so sweet. Oh, and if you hear, like, random sound... I've had to fix this book so many times. I keep having to fix the spine, because I've read the hell out of this book over the years, so... The last time I fixed it, I only had fabric glue, so I tried it, and it worked. It fixed the spine perfectly, so... Nancy Drew is awesome. Yep, let's just dive right into Chapter 2. Chapter 2, A Missing Will. The blue convertible sped along the country road. Nancy smiled grimly. I'm afraid I'm exceeding the speed limit, she thought. But I almost wish a trooper would stop me. Then I could tell him what happened to the poor Turner sisters. Come on, Nancy, you know you're smarter than the cops. You always outsmart the cops. Nancy watched the tire marks, which the van driven by the thieves had evidently made in the dirt road. Convenient. But a few miles further, on a feeling of dismay came over her. But a few miles farther on, a feeling of dismay came over her. Sorry. Continuing. She had reached a V-shaped intersection of two highways. Both roads were paved, and since no tire impressions could be seen, Nancy did not know which highway the thieves had taken. Oh dear, she sighed. Now what shall I do? Nancy concluded that her wisest move would be to take the road which led to River Heights. There was a state police barracks just a few miles ahead. I'll stop there and report the theft. She kept looking for the van, which she recalled as charcoal gray. I wish I'd seen the license number or the name of the firm that owns the van, said Nancy to herself ruefully. When she reached state police headquarters, Nancy introduced herself to Captain Runcie and told about the robbery, given the meager information that she could about the suspects. The officer promised to send out an alarm immediately. were the thieves and their charcoal gray moving van. Nancy continued her journey home, thinking of the Turners and their problems. I wonder why Mr. Josiah Crowley left all his money to the Tophams and none to his other relatives. Why did he change his mind? Those Tophams are well-to-do and don't need money as much as the Turners. Nancy really said, eat the rich. Nancy did not know Richard Topham, but she was acquainted with his wife, as well as his daughters. They were arrogant and unreasonable, and disliked by many of the shopkeepers in town. Ada and Isabel had been unpopular in high school. They had talked incessantly of money and social position, making themselves very obnoxious to other students. I wonder, Nancy thought, if a way can't be found so that the Turners could give a share of the Crowley money. I'll ask Dad. 5 minutes later, Nancy pulled into the double garage and hurried across the lawn to the kitchen door of the Drews' large brick house. The building stood well back from the street and was surrounded by tall, beautiful trees. "Hello, Nancy," greeted the pleasant, slightly plump woman who opened the door. She was Hannah Gruen, housekeeper for the Drews, who had helped rear Nancy since the death of the girl's own mother many years before. Nancy gave her a hug, then asked, "Dad, home? I see his car is in the garage." "Your father's in the living room, and dinner will be ready in a few minutes." Nancy went to say hello to her tall, handsome father, then hurried to wash her hands and comb her hair before the three who formed the Drew household sat down to dinner. During the meal, Nancy related the adventures of the afternoon. "What tricky thieves!" Hannah Gruen burst out. I hope the police capture them." "They certainly took advantage of those Turner sisters," Mr. Drew commented. "Mary and Edna are in financial difficulties," Nancy commented. "Isn't it a shame that Josiah Crowley didn't bequeath some of his estate to the Turners and other relatives who need the money?" Carson Drew smiled affectionately at his only child, then said, "Yes, it is, Nancy, but unless a will written later turns up, that is the way it has to be." "The Turners think that there is another will," Nancy told him. "Wouldn't it be wonderful if it could be found?" "I agree," spoke up Hannah. "It's well known in town that Mrs. Topham and her daughters were unkind to Josiah Crowley for some time before he died. Their excuse was that Josiah's eccentricities were extremely trying. The Tophams have never been noted for any charitable inclinations," Mr. Drew observed, with a smile. "However, they did give Josiah a home. Only because they knew he was going to leave all his money to them," Hannah said. "If I'd been Josiah, I wouldn't have stayed there." The housekeeper sighed. "But when people get old, they don't like change, and probably he put up with them rather than move." She said the treatment the Tophams had accorded old Josiah Crowley had aroused a great deal of unfavorable comment throughout River Heights. Nancy had not known him personally, but she had often seen the elderly man out on the street. Secretly, she had regarded him as a rather nice, kindly person. His wife had died during the influenza epidemic, and after that, he had made his home with various relatives. According to rumors, all these people had admitted that he had paid his board and done many favors for them. They in turn had been very kind to him, and though poor themselves had tried to make Josiah Crowley comfortable and happy. "Tell me everything you know about Mr. Crowley," Nancy urged her father. The lawyer said that the old man had publicly declared he intended to provide in his will for several deserving relatives and friends. Then 3 years before his death, the Topham family, who had never shown any interest in him, had experienced a sudden change of heart. They had begged Josiah Crowley to make his home with them, and at last he had consented. Shortly after moving into Topham House, Mr. Drew was told that the old man had decided to leave all his money to them. Mr. Crowley, though failing in health, maintained a firm grip on life, but as time went on, he became more and more unhappy. He continued to live with the Tophams, but it was whispered about that he frequently slipped away to visit other relatives and friends, and that he intended to change his will again. "Then there must be a letter," Nancy said hopefully. Mr. Drew nodded and went on, One day, Josiah Crowley became critically ill. Just before his death, he attempted to communicate something to the doctor who attended him, but his words, other than will, were unintelligible. After the funeral, only one will came to light, giving the entire fortune to the Tophams. Dad, you suppose Mr. Crowley was trying to tell the doctor something about another will, which he had put someplace where the Tophams couldn't find it? Nancy asked. Very likely, the lawyer replied. Probably he intended to leave his money to relatives who had been kind to him, but fate cheated him of the opportunity. Do you think anybody looked for another will? Nancy questioned. I don't know, but I'm sure of this. If another will shows up, Richard Topham will fight it. The estate is considerable. I understand that they aren't the kind of people to share good fortune. Can't the present will be contested? Nancy asked. I hear that other relatives have filed a claim declaring that they were told another will had been made in their favor, but unless it is located, I doubt that the matter will ever go any further. But the Tophams don't deserve the fortune, Hannah Gruen remarked, and besides, they don't need the money. It doesn't seem fair. It may not seem fair, but it is legal, Mr. Drew told her, and I'm afraid nothing can be done about the situation. Poor Judy and her aunts, Nancy said. There are others affected in the same way, her father remarked. For instance, 2 young women who live on the River Road. I don't know their names. I understand they were not related to Mr. Crowley, but were great favorites of his. They are having a struggle and could use some extra money. Nancy lapsed into silence. She felt strongly that a mystery lurked behind the Crowley estate. Dad, don't you believe Josiah Crowley made a second will? Nancy questioned suddenly. You sound like a trial lawyer the way you cross-examine me, Mr. Drew protested, but with evident enjoyment. To tell you the truth, Nancy, I don't know what to think, but something did happen which might indicate that Mr. Crowley at least intended to make another will. Please go on, Nancy begged impatiently. Well, one day, nearly a year ago, I was in the First National Bank when Crowley came in with Henry Rolstead. The attorney who specializes in wills and other estate matters? Nancy inquired. The only estate attorney. Yes, I had no intention of listening to their conversation, but I couldn't help overhearing a few words that made me think they were discussing a will. Mr. Crowley made an appointment to call at Rolstead's office the following day. Oh, cried Nancy excitedly, that looks as though Mr. Crowley had made a new will, doesn't it? But why didn't Mr. Rolstead say something about it at the time of Mr. Crowley's death? For one of many reasons, Mr. Drew replied. In the first place, he may never have drawn a new will for Mr. Crowley, and even if he had, the old man might have changed his mind again and torn it up. Before Nancy spoke again, she finished the delicious apple pudding which Hannah had made. Then she looked thoughtfully at her father. Dad, Mr. Rolstead is an old friend of yours, isn't he? Yes, an old friend and college classmate. Then won't you please ask him if he ever drew up a will for Mr. Crowley, or knows anything that might solve this mystery? That's a rather delicate question, young lady. He may tell me it's none of my business. You know he won't. You're such good friends. He'll understand why you're taking special interest in this case. Will you do it, please? I know you like to help people who are in trouble, her father said. I suppose I could invite Mr. Rolstead to have lunch with me tomorrow. Wonderful, Nancy interrupted eagerly. That would be a splendid opportunity to find out what he knows about a lighter will. All right, I'll try to arrange a date. How about joining us? Nancy's face lit up as she said, Oh, thank you, Dad. I'd love to. I hope it can be tomorrow so we wouldn't have to waste any time trying to find another will. Mr. Drew smiled. We, he said. You mean you might try to find a hidden will if Mr. Crowley wrote one? I might. Nancy's eyes sparkled in anticipation. All right. Chapter 2. So in summary, we've got a rich old guy who gave all of his money in very shady circumstances to a very rich family who nobody likes. Yeah, so this book, takes place directly at the beginning of the Depression, pretty much, because it started in 1929, I guess. And when they mention the influenza pandemic, or epidemic, they obviously mean the Spanish flu. Eat the rich, quote, Nancy Drew, 1930s. Yeah, pretty much. She's like, look, we hate these people, and they're already way too rich. We need to take the money away from them. Carson Drew is kind of awesome. He's, like, super feminist for 1930. Nancy's mother died in a mysterious boating explosion. Right? Like, this book is just honestly savage sometimes. Mr. Crowley seems nice, R.I.P. Yeah, Mr. Crowley seems like he was chill. A lot of tragic backstory, yeah. We need Legal Eagle to explain how this works. Yeah, pretty much. I almost imagine, like, Carson Drew speaking to Nancy about wills in the voice of Legal Eagle, you know? Apple pudding. It doesn't sound appetizing. Apparently it was a pretty common thing. I've never had it, though. It could be good, I guess. Isn't this all, like, private information? I mean, about the will? Probably. I don't know what the attorney-client privilege is like in this certain situation. Nancy says she doesn't like gossiping, but then gossips. Yeah, pretty much. Nancy will do anything to help people that she thinks are more deserving than other people getting money. I don't like gossip, but you know who I heard loves gossip? Exactly. Pretty much that. Nancy drew her shotgun. Fun fact, I'm pretty sure that they made a point to, in a lot of books, depending on who was writing the books, a lot of them refused to show Nancy with a gun because they were children's books, and they didn't think, like, violence and death should be in children's books. But I guess talking about people dying in a boating explosion is fine. We'll see Drew all later. Bye, Anton. Thank you for hanging out. Everybody say bye. Nancy Drew 2022 and the mystery of why no one wears a damn mask in a pandemic, right? I had a crush on her dad as a kid. Yeah, I probably did too at some point. Carson's kind of awesome. Alright, so Nancy is meddling in the affairs of a deceased person, but she has good intentions, so, you know. That's where we pick up in chapter 3. I'm gonna take a sip of my tea before I continue. Very proud of my new mug. I just found it at Home Goods. Everybody stay hydrated, by the way. Alright. Chapter 3. An unpleasant meeting. What are your plans for this morning, Nancy? Her father asked at the breakfast table. I thought I'd do a little shopping, she replied. Her eyes twinkled. There's a dance coming up at the country club, and I'd like to get a new dress. That's right, Nancy is kind of rich in of herself, but you know, she tries. Then will you phone me about lunch? Or better still, how about eating with me, whether Mr. Rolstead comes or not? I'll be there, Nancy declared, gaily. All right. Drop it at my office about 12:30. If Mr. Rolstead does accept my invitation, we'll try to find out something about Josiah Crowley's will. Mr. Drew pushed back the chair. I must hurry now or I'll be late getting downtown. After her father had left, Nancy finished her breakfast and then went to the kitchen to help Hannah Gruen, who was already who had already left the table. Why do they keep using Hannah's last name every single time? Like, we know who Hannah is. There's only one. Any errands for me? Nancy asked. Yes, dear. Here's a list, the housekeeper replied. And good luck with your detective work. A very normal thing to say to a teenager. Hannah Gruen gazed at the girl affectionately, and several thoughts raced through her mind. In school, Nancy had been very popular and made many friends. But through no fault of her own, she'd made 2 enemies, Ada and Isabel Topham. This worried Hannah. The sisters, intensely jealous of Nancy, had tried to discredit her in positions she had held in school, but loyal friends had always sprung to Nancy's defense. As a result, Ada and Isabel had become more unpleasant than they ever had to Nancy. Thanks for your encouragement, she said to Hannah a little later, giving her a hug. No, I'm not going to optimize my PC right now. It's not a good time. Whatever you do, Nancy, beware of those Topham sisters. They'd be only too happy to make things difficult for you. I promised to be on my guard. Before leaving the house, Nancy phoned the Turners. She was glad to hear that Judy had suffered no ill effects from her fall, but she was disappointed that the police had found no clue as to the thieves who had stolen their silverware. Please let me know if you learn anything, Nancy said, and Edna promised to do so. Becomingly dressed in a tan cotton suit, Nancy set off in her convertible for the shopping district. She drove down the boulevard, and upon reaching the more congested streets, made her way skillfully through heavy traffic, then pulled into a parking lot. I think I'll try Taylor's department store first, for a dress, she decided. Taylor's was one of River Heights' finest stores. Nancy purchased several items for Hannah on the main floor, and then went directly to the Mrs. Wearing Apparel. Mrs. Wearing Apparel, okay. Section of the second floor. Usually Nancy had no trouble finding a sales clerk, but this particular morning seemed to be an especially busy one in the department, and an extra rush of customers had temporarily overwhelmed the sales force. Nancy sat down in a convenient chair to await her turn. Her thoughts wandered to the Turner sisters and to little Judy. Would she be able to help them? She was suddenly brought out of her reverie by loud voice complaints. We've been standing here nearly 10 minutes, a shrill voice declared. Send a saleswoman to us immediately. Nancy turned to see Ada and Isabel Topham speaking to the floor manager. I'm afraid I can't, the man replied regretfully. There are a number of others ahead of you. All our salespeople are... Perhaps you don't know who we are, Ada interrupted rudely. Indeed I do, the floor manager told her wearily. I will have a saleswoman here in a few moments, if you will only wait. We're not accustomed to waiting, Isabel Topham told him icily. Such service, Ada chimed in. Do you realize that my father owns a considerable stock in Taylor's? If we report your conduct to him, he could have you discharged. I'm sorry, the harassed man apologized. But it is a rule of the store. You must await your turn. Ada tossed her head, and her eyes flashed angrily. This did nothing to improve her looks. Sam. In spite of the expensive clothes she wore, Ada was not attractive. She was very thin and sallow, with an expression of petulance. Now that her face was distorted with anger, she was almost ugly. Isabel, the pride of the Topham family, was rather pretty, but her face lacked character. She had acquired an artificially elegant manner of speaking, which, although irritating, was sometimes amusing. It was her mother's ambition that Isabel marry into a socially prominent family. I pity any future husband of hers, Nancy thought with a chuckle. Suddenly, Ada and Isabel saw Nancy, who nodded a greeting. Isabel coldly returned the nod, but Ada gave no indication that she had even noticed Nancy. At the moment, a saleswoman hurried toward the Topham sisters. At once, they began to shower abuse upon the young woman for her failure to wait on them sooner. "What is it you wish to look at, Miss Topham?" the clerk said, flushing. "Evening dresses." The saleswoman brought out several dresses. Nancy watched curiously as the Tophams, in an unpleasant frame of mind, tossed aside the beautiful models with scarcely a second glance. They found fault with every garment. "This very chic gown," the saleswoman told them hopefully, as she displayed a particularly attractive dress of lace and chiffon. "It arrived only this morning." Ada picked it up, gave the dress one careless glance, and then tossed it into a chair as the distracted clerk who went off to bring her other frocks. The fluffy gown slipped to the floor in a crumpled mess. To Nancy's horror, Ada stepped on it. As she turned to examine another dress in disgust, Nancy went to pick it up. "Not the chiffon dress." "Leave that alone," Ada cried, her eyes blazing. "Nobody asked for your help." "It's none of your business." As Nancy continued to hold... I'm sorry, I skipped a line. "Nobody asked for your help. Are you buying this?" Nancy asked evenly. "It's none of your business." As Nancy continued to hold the dress, Ada, in a rage, snatched it from her hands, causing a long tear in the chiffon skirt. "Oh!" Isabel cried. "Now you've done it. We'd better get out of here, Ada." "And why?" the haughty sister shrilled. "It was Nancy Drew's fault. She's always making trouble." "It was not my fault," Nancy said. "Come on, Ada," Isabel urged, "before that clerk gets back." Reluctantly, Ada followed Isabel out of the department. As they rushed towards a waiting elevator, Nancy gazed after them. At this moment, the saleswoman reappeared with an armful of lovely frocks. She stared in bewilderment at the torn dress. "Where did my customers go?" she asked Nancy worriedly. Nancy pointed towards the elevator but made no comment. Instead, she said, "I'm looking for an evening dress myself. The torn one is very pretty. Do you think it could be mended?" "Oh, I don't know," the woebegone clerk wailed. "I'll probably be held responsible, and I can't afford to pay for the dress." "I'm sure tailors wouldn't do that to you," Nancy said kindly. "If there's any trouble, I'll speak to the manager myself. What usually happens is that such a dress is greatly reduced." "Thank you," the clerk replied. "I'll call Mrs. Reed, the fitter, and see what can be done." "First, let me try on the dress," Nancy said, smiling. They found a vacant fitting room, and Nancy took off her suit and blouse, and then she slipped the lovely pale blue dance creation over her head, and the saleswoman zipped it up. "It's darling on you," she said enthusiastically. Nancy grinned. "I kind of like myself in it," she said. "Please call the fitter now." Presently, Miss Reed, a gray-haired woman, appeared. Within seconds she had made a change in an overlap of the chiffon skirt. The tear was no longer visible, and the style of the dress was actually improved. "I told our manager what happened," said the saleswoman. "If you want the dress, he will reduce the price 50%. "How wonderful!" Nancy exclaimed. Laughing, she said, "That price will fit into my budget nicely. I'll take the dress. Please send it." She gave her name and address. To herself, she added, "Ada Topham did me a favor. But if she ever finds out what happened, she'll certainly be burned up." Nancy suppressed a giggle. "It's been a real pleasure waiting on you, Miss Drew," the saleswoman said after Miss Reed left and Nancy was putting on her suit. "But how I dread to see those Topham sisters come in here. They're so unreasonable, and they'll be even worse when they get Josiah Crowley's money." "Everybody knows about this money, right?" The woman lowered her voice. "The estate hasn't been settled, but the girls are counting on the fortune already. Last week I heard Ada say to her sister, 'Oh, I guess there's no question about our getting old Crowley's fortune. But I wish Father would stop worrying that somebody is going to show up with a later will that may do us out of it.'" Nancy was too discreet to engage in gossip with the saleswoman. Gossip counter. But she was interested and excited about the information. The fact that Mr. Topham was disturbed indicated to her that he too suspected Josiah Crowley had made a second will. The conversation reminded Nancy of her date. She glanced at her wristwatch and saw that it was 12 o'clock. "I must hurry or I'll be late for an appointment with my dad," she told the saleswoman. Nancy drove directly to her father's office. Although she was a few minutes ahead of the appointment time, she found that he was ready to leave. "What luck, Dad," Nancy said eagerly. "Did Mr. Rolstead accept your luncheon invitation?" "Yes, we are meeting him at the Royal Hotel in 10 minutes. Do you still think I should quiz him about the Crowley will?" "Oh, I'm more interested than ever in this case," she told her father about the saleswoman's gossipy remarks. Said Mr. Drew. "It's not what you'd call evidence, but there's an old saying that usually holds good. Where there's smoke, there's fire. Come, let's go." The Royal Hotel was located less than a block away, and Nancy and her father quickly walked the distance. Mr. Rolstead was waiting in the lobby. Carson Drew introduced his daughter. Then the three made their way to the dining room where a table had been reserved for them. At first, the conversation centered about a variety of subjects. As the luncheon progressed, the two lawyers talked enthusiastically of their college days together and finally of their profession. Nancy began to fear that the subject of the Crowley estate might never be brought up. Then, after the dessert course, Mr. Drew skillfully turned the conversation into a new channel and mentioned some strange cases which had been handled. "By the way," he said, "I haven't heard the details of the Crowley case. How are the Tophams making out? I understand other relatives are trying to break the will." For a moment, Mr. Rolstead remained silent. Was he reluctant to enter into a discussion about the matter? Nancy wondered. Finally, the lawyer said quietly, "The settlement of the estate wasn't given to me, Carson, but I confess I followed it rather closely because of something that happened a year ago. As the present will stands, I do not believe that it can be broken. Then the Tophams fall heir to the entire estate," Mr. Drew commented. "Yes, unless a more recent will is uncovered." "Another will?" inquired Mr. Drew innocently. "Then you believe the Crowley made a second will?" Mr. Rolstead hesitated, as though uncertain whether or not he should divulge any further information. Then, with a quick glance about, he lowered his voice and said, "Of course, this is strictly confidential." And that's the end of the chapter. Yeah, so, okay. The sisters suck. They're... Is it out of date to call them Karens? They're Karens. Nancy drew up after writing. Oh, God. Honestly, Pan Panic, because Nancy's so pretty as well. She is super pretty. I refuse to drink water. Drink water! Secretly, it's a whole mug of gin. It's tea. I promise. I don't drink... Well, I do drink gin, but not that much. And this stream would go very downhill if I was drinking this much gin. She's rich, but she's productive in society by solving mysteries like Batman. Exactly! I wish I had a whole mug of gin. Yeah. Green tea is good. I'm usually a fan of, like, black tea. Like, this is like an English breakfast tea. That's my favorite, just with a lot of sugar, because I did grow up in the South. Yeah, sorry about the PC noises. I don't know, it tries to make me do updates at, like, the weirdest times. Karens have been around since forever. At least since 1930 is what we're proving in this. Karens have always been a thing. Yep, the shade of it all. Yeah, can we talk about how the narrator is just like, yeah, these girls are mean and ugly. Like, damn. How do you coldly nod? I guess you're just like, you just glare somebody down and are like, hi, but I hate you. More shade than the total eclipse, yep. Nancy did nothing, I'ma fight them. Yeah, Nancy's just straight up being bullied by these two girls who suck. That's basically what's happening. Nancy's so sweet, she tries so hard. Yeah, so I love Nancy Drew as a fictional character for children to look up to, because she's like, she's so smart, she's so resourceful, but she's so kind, but also just really sassy. Like, she stands up for herself and other people. No, there's an annoying static hum in the live stream. Is it still there? Is it gone? Do I need it? It's, oh, it's the rain. Yeah. The rain is... Yeah, it's just rain in the background. The rain and chill vibes is why I have not taken any hits off my pen. I'd be asleep. Yeah, I hope it's not annoying. I'm just trying to create an atmosphere. I love your videos. Oh, thank you! That's so sweet. We got Jasper and Horace and now Anastasia and Drizella. Yes, this is what I'm picturing in my mind when I see these four characters. The hell with Karens. Next week, watch Avery optimize her computer. Yeah, you know those streams where people, like, edit videos live? It's like that, but I'm just optimizing my computer. It's real boring. Maybe the meme stream can be... The meme stream is coming. I completely forgot that we said... Or I said we were gonna do that. But yeah, that's still a thing. I just don't know when we're gonna do it. Great atmosphere. Thank you. This is awesome. Thank you. I'm glad you guys like it. Nancy Drew is a good role model for youngsters, whereas Sherlock Holmes... It's hard for teenage girls to relate to. I mean, I guess so. I also always liked Sherlock Holmes as a teenager. Although when I was in high school, I guess was when the Sherlock series with you know, Benadryl cucumber snacks was out, and then everybody had a crush on Sherlock. How would I feel about me adding me as a character or reference on my Insta comic? Oh, that's so sweet. That's so kind of you. What's your comic about? Your pen is almost dead. No. So let's see, 4 chapters in. Always a comfort. Yeah, I really like the Benedict Cumberbatch Sherlock. To be real, I don't think I ever finished it. I don't think I ever watched the last series of it. I fell off the fandom train, I guess, just because, remember, they had such long gaps in between series, and then, like, I completely got distracted and then forgot what had happened in the other ones. You've only found Benedict Cumberbatch hot as Doctor Strange. Okay, that's fair. Doctor Strange... He's not like my favorite superhero, but I like him. I'm very excited for Multiverse. Is anybody going to see it this weekend? Getting Who Framed Roger Rabbit vibes this far? Yeah. Yeah. I believe Who Framed Roger Rabbit was based on a book, or is that something that my brain just made up and was like, yeah, that sounds right. Am I gonna watch the new Chip and Dale movie? I can. I think I said when I did the Chip and Dale cartoon video that I could if people wanted to see it. It's tricky when I cover new things because, like, typically I cover very old things, but I typically make exceptions when something is just so weird that I have to vent about it, and I'm like, I need this outlet just to talk, and even though it's kind of, you know, different. Or if somebody... if something is trying to recreate something in a nostalgia setting or, like, an older setting. So, like, Cuphead. We talked about Cuphead. because it's based in 1930. It's based on that whole kind of thing. So yeah, I can definitely talk about Chip and Dale. I feel like it might be a train wreck. But yeah, I can definitely talk about it. I'm very curious to see if it's good or if it's terrible. Love Scarlet Witch, especially after WandaVision. Scarlet Witch is one of my favorites. I love Scarlet Witch. I love Loki. I don't know if that makes me like basic as far as like Marvel goes, but whatever. They're the best written characters. I don't care. It's about superheroes and teenagers and diversity. It's a friendship and redemption story about an autistic teenager, kid balancing, both a teenager. That sounds amazing. Congratulations on that. That sounds really, really interesting. I'm honored. Into Marvel or superheroes in general. I'm mostly into Marvel. I am, as far as DC goes, I've only really ever been super interested in Batman. I was really obsessed with, and this might be kind of a hot take or whatever in the DC universe, but I was obsessed with Gotham, the TV show. It was wild, and it definitely went downhill the more years it went on, but I was obsessed. I binged that show like crazy. Wanda and Vision. Yeah, they're goals. I love Wanda and Vision. Marvel is epic. I want to watch more DC, but I barely do. Yeah, unfortunately, not a lot of the DC movies have been very good. I'm sorry. If you love DC movies, that's totally valid. Yeah. Too lazy to catch up with Marvel. It's hard to keep up with it. Like, I have not finished What If yet, and I haven't watched Moon Knight, because I just haven't had the time. All-time favorite is Spider-Man. That was my favorite growing up. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man was what got me obsessed with comics in the first place. The new Batman movie. I haven't seen the new Batman movie yet because it's 3 hours long and that intimidates me. But I'm sure it's great and I do need to watch it. It's on HBO Max now. Never been much for the Marvel movies, DC, but their earlier work. Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I love... accidentally clicked this, like, does clicking like reverse it? Yeah, you can change your like or dislike. It's okay. I'm not offended if you wanted to dislike it. Andrew Garfield is my favorite Spider-Man. I love that he's getting recognition finally, because do you remember when he was Spider-Man and like the big thing was to hate on him for it? Like, I always liked him as Spider-Man. The movies were, you know, not as well written, but like him as Spider-Man, I thought he did a great job. Gambit is my boy. I haven't read that many comics with Gambit, but yeah, he's pretty cool. Marvel movies are long and confusing. I can see that. I think they're less confusing as an extended universe than Star Wars, just because Star Wars, like, in order to watch the whole thing from start to finish, you've got to, like, watch parts of TV shows and then skip over, because, like, it's all the way that it's all out of order. But yeah, that's valid for sure. Okay, I'll get into Chapter 4 in a second. I know I'm not supposed to be digressing and talking about Marvel, but I love Marvel. Andrew Garfield is my favorite Spider-Man. In fact, Spider-Man inspired me to come up with my Insta comic. Yeah, Spider-Man is a great superhero because he's so relatable, right? He's just kind of like this kid who has these superpowers and like, I don't know what to do with these superpowers. And that's accurate. I feel like if I was a superhero, I would be Spider-Man. Just like, I don't know. I guess I'm gonna go save the city now. Chapters are there in the book. I think there's 20. I think there's 20. Yeah. 20 chapters. I feel like when Disney bought Marvel, they've just been oversaturating us with it. It's fatiguing. That's fair. Yeah. I kind of like that there's a lot of content, but I also like I feel like a fake fan when I'm not. Like, people have been posting about Moon Knight, and I've kind of given up on not being spoiled because I'm so far behind, but I'm just like, I feel like a fake fan. I haven't seen it yet. Just not a fan of Star Wars. Yeah, it's something you either like or don't. I'm not, like, obsessive over Star Wars. I definitely enjoy it, obviously, because I have the... Obviously, I have lots of Star Wars stickers. I love Star Wars, but, like, I'm not, like, obsessed, if that makes any sense. Like, I like it. I'm a casual lover of Star Wars. And R2-D2 in the little, bow tie. I've never heard of those comics, Paul. I must be out of the loop. Moon Knight Loki triggers me. Yeah, I from what I've seen, it looks pretty intense, yeah? Can't watch it. I'll keep that in mind. Thank you for the warning. Alright. Chapter 4. Are we ready for Chapter 4? I think. Does anybody else do this where you kind of check ahead to see how many pages in a chapter you're in for? Just me? Alright. Yeah, I would definitely be up for doing old Marvel movies. I've actually, for pretty much since the beginning of my channel, I've wanted to cover those old Thor movies from the 80s. Or like the Hulk show, The Incredible Hulk. I think that would be great. Oh gosh, yeah, no, if it's, yeah, definitely you gotta be careful with, you know, being triggered by media that is supposed to be fun is probably the worst thing, so I'm so sorry. I feel like they didn't handle portraying DID the best, which frustrates me. Yeah, I don't have any experience with DID, but I see that, in general, I definitely see that most of the time it gets handled pretty poorly, which is sad. Either first new Loki from Marvel or The Mask. Yeah, isn't it funny that they kind of, like, the two Loki... Like, the Loki in The Mask kind of sort of resembles Loki in the MCU, like, same features. Oh, that's right, Jurassic World, Domination, and Prehistoric Planet coming up. Amazing Spider-Man for the 70s with Nicholas Hammond. Yes, I need to do a video on that. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, it's a shame that, like, hopefully there's better representation for DID in the future. Okay, I'm gonna get back into reading, I promise. Here we go. Okay. Chapter 4. Racing the Storm. Confidential? Mr. Drew repeated, looking at Mr. Rolstead. You may rest assured that whatever you tell us will not be repeated to anyone. Well, I'll say this much, Mr. Rolstead went on. About a year ago, Josiah Crowley came to me and said he wanted to draw up a new will. He indicated that he intended to spread out his bequests among several people. He expressed a desire to write the will himself and asked me a number of questions. Feels legally ill-advisable. I took him to my office and told him exactly how to proceed. When he left, he promised to have me look over the document after he had drawn it up. Then you actually saw his will? Mr. Drew asked in surprise. No, strange to say, Crowley never came back. I don't know whether he ever wrote the will or not. And if he did, there would be a chance that it would not be legal, Nancy spoke up. Yes, he might have typed it and signed the paper without a witness. In this state, at least 2 witnesses are required, and 3 are advisable. What would happen, Nancy asked, if a person were ill or dying and had no witnesses and wanted to make a will? Mr. Rolstead smiled. That sometimes happens if the person writes the will himself by hand and signs it, so there's no doubt that it's the same person that did both. The surrogate's office will accept it for probate. Then if Mr. Crowley wrote out and signed a new will, it would be legal, Nancy commented. That's right. But there's another thing to remember. It's pretty risky for someone who is not a lawyer to draw up a will that cannot be broken. Mr. Drew nodded. If Josiah Crowley left any loophole in a will he wrote personally, the Tophams would drag the matter into court. Yes, it's a foregone conclusion that Tophams will fight to keep the fortune, whether they have a right to it or not. I believe some other relatives have filed a claim to bring up the moment they have but up to the moment they have no proof that a later will exists. Although Nancy gave no indication of her feelings, the possibility that Mr. Crowley had made a new will thrilled her. As soon as Mr. Drew paid the luncheon check, the three arose and left the dining room. Mr. Rolstead took leave of Nancy and her father in the lobby. Well, Nancy, did you find out what you wanted to know? Mr. Drew asked after the lawyer had left. Oh, Dad, it's just as I expected. I'm sure Mr. Crowley did make a later will. He hid it someplace. If only I could find out where. It would be like looking for a needle in a haystack, Mr. Drew commented. I must figure out a way, Nancy said, with determination. I want to help little Judy. She awoke the next morning thinking about the mystery. But where should she start hunting for possible clues to a second will? She continued pondering about it while she showered and dressed. As she entered the dining room, she was greeted with a cheery good morning from her father and Hannah Gruen, again with the last name. During breakfast, Mr. Drew said, Nancy, would you do a little errand for me this morning? Why, of course, Dad. I have a number of legal documents which must be delivered to Judge Hart in Masonville sometime before noon. I'd take them myself, but I have several important appointments. I'd appreciate it if you would drive over there with them. Is Carson Drew a big business dad? I'll be glad to go, Nancy promised willingly. Besides, it's such a wonderful day. I'll enjoy the trip. Where are the papers? At the office. You can drive me down, and I'll get them for you. Nancy, wearing a yellow sunback dress and a jacket, hurried away to get her gloves and handbag. Before Mr. Drew had collected his own belongings, she had brought her car from the garage and was waiting for him at the front door. That makes it sound like she drove her car right up to the front door and just was, like, waiting. I put the top down so I can enjoy the sun, she explained as her father climbed in. Good idea. I haven't heard you mention the Crowley case yet today, Mr. Drew teased as they rode along. Have you forgotten about it? Nancy's face clouded. No, I haven't forgotten, but I must admit I am stumped as to where to search for clues. Maybe I can help you. I've learned that the two girls on River Road who expected to be remembered in the will are named Hoover. Like the president? You might look them up on your return trip. That's great. I'll watch the mailboxes for their name. When they reached the building where Mr. Drew had his office, Nancy parked the car and waited while her father went upstairs to get the legal document to be delivered to Judge Hart. Returning a few minutes later, he placed a fat manila envelope in his daughter's hand. Give this to the judge. You know where to find him. Yes, Dad. In the old Merchants Trust Company building. That's right. Selecting a recently constructed highway, Nancy rode along, glancing occasionally at the neatly planted fields on either side. Beyond were rolling hills. Pretty, she commented to herself. Oh, why can't all people be nice like this scenery and not make trouble? It was nearly 11 o'clock when she finally drove into Masonville. Nancy went at once to Judge Hart's office, but was informed he had gone to the courthouse. Recalling that her father had mentioned the necessity of the papers being delivered before noon, she set off in search of the judge. She's just tracking this guy down. Nancy had considerable trouble trying to see him, and it was 12 o'clock when at last she delivered the manila envelope to his hands. Thank you very much, he said. I'll need these directly after lunch. Nancy smiled. Then I'm glad I found you. When Judge Hart learned that Nancy was the daughter of Carson Drew, he at once insisted that she have luncheon with him and his wife at their home before returning to River Heights. She accepted the invitation and spent a very pleasant hour with the Harts. During this meal, the judge laughingly asked if Nancy was still playing aid to her father. Oh yes, she said at once, and told him about the Drews' interests in the Crowley case. Did you know Josiah Crowley or even hear of him? She asked. Both the Harts nodded. A maid who used to be with them came to work for us after Crowley's death. The judge explained. Jane herself passed away a short time ago. We never met Josiah, Mrs. Hart added, but Jane pointed him out to my husband and me one time, down on Main Street. Did he have relatives or friends in town? Nancy inquired. I think not, the judge replied. Nancy wondered what old Josiah had been doing in Masonville if he had no relatives there. The town was not known as a spot for sightseeing. Her interest was further quickened when Mrs. Hart remarked that she had seen Mr. Crowley in town at another time also. That's a weird way to word that sentence. Anyway. How long ago was that? The girl asked. Mrs. Hart thought a minute and replied, Oh, less than a year, I'd say. When luncheon was over, the judge said he must leave. Nancy told the Harts she, too, should go. She thanked them for their hospitality and said goodbye. Soon she was driving homeward. Why had Mr. Crowley gone to Masonville? She asked herself. Could it have had anything to do with the later will? Nancy had chosen a route which would take her to River Road. Half an hour later, she turned into the beautiful country road, which wound in and out along the Muskoka River, and began to look at the names on the mailboxes. Hoover, she reminded herself. About halfway to River Heights, while enjoying the pastoral scenes of cows standing knee-high in shallow sections of the stream and sheep gazing on flower-dotted hillsides, Nancy suddenly realized the sun had been blotted out. A thunderstorm's on the way, she told herself, glancing at black clouds scuttling across the sky. Yes, she has pretty unpredictable weather as well. Guess I'd better put the top of the car up. She pressed the button on the dashboard to raise the top, but nothing happened. Puzzled, Nancy tried again. Still, there was no response. By this time, large drops of rain had started to fall. I'll get soaked, Nancy thought as she looked around. There was no shelter in sight, but ahead, past a steep rise, was a sharp bend in the road. Hopefully there, she would find a house or barn beyond. Nancy started for the car again. Vivid forked lightning streaked across the sky. It was followed by an earth-shaking clap of thunder. The rain came down harder. Oh, why didn't I bring a raincoat? Nancy wailed. When Nancy swung around the bend, she was delighted to see a barn with lightning rods. When Nancy swung around the bend, she was delighted to see a barn with lightning rods about a quarter-mile ahead. Farther on stood a small white house. I wonder if that's the Hoover place, Nancy mused. By now the storm was letting loose in all its fury. The sky was dark as night, and Nancy had to switch on her headlights to see the road. She was already thoroughly drenched, and her thought of shelter at this point was one of safety rather than keeping dry. Nancy turned on the windshield wipers, but the rain was so blinding in its intensity, it was impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. Almost in an instant, the road had dissolved into a sea of mud. Nancy had been caught in a number of storms, but never one as violent as this. She feared a bad skid might land her in a ditch before she could reach the shelter of the barn. How much further is it? She worried. It didn't seem to be this far away. The next instant, to Nancy's right, a ball of fire rocketed down from the sky. Oh, that was close, she thought fearfully. Her skin tingled from the electrical vibrations in the air. Yikes. A moment later, a surge of relief swept over her. At last, she breathed. At the side of the road, the barn loomed up. Its large double doors were wide open. Without hesitation, Nancy headed straight for the building and drove in. The next moment, she heard a piercing scream. End of chapter. So... how are we feeling? So Nancy had lunch with a random lawyer who gave her not new information, but just information, I guess. And yeah. She's now trapped in a barn with somebody screaming. Feel free to read the private legal papers at your leisure, her father hinted heavily. Pretty much. Carson's playing fast and loose with that attorney-client privilege. How does her dad not get fired immediately? I have no idea. President Vacuum sucked. Yeah. Wasn't he, like, a really hated president when these books came out? Like, it's kind of funny that they named a character after him. Maybe the next read can be Jurassic Park. So I always forget that Jurassic Park was a book. Like, I know that in my brain, but I always think about the movie first. I'm one of those people. Which I guess is most people. The book is pretty... I mean, the movie's pretty big, obviously. It's gonna be a long stream. I mean, if it gets to a reasonable hour and we're not done, I'm just gonna do another stream to finish the book. It was one of those goats that screams like a person. That would be, lovely. I doubt that. This book is super savage, as we've covered. I assume it's similar to Sherlock. A little bit, different time period, and definitely written for children. So a little different. Yeah, I've read most of the original Nancy Drew books anyway, and a bunch of the newer ones. Well, they're probably not new anymore, because, you know, whatever, the ones that came out when I was in high school. If Sherlock was a teenage girl, he would probably get along with Nancy, though. If time travel exists, if somebody wants to write a fanfic where all the classic, if the Mystery Incorporated and Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys all meet up, I feel like they would all be friends as well. A crossover, if you will. You'll notice Nancy has a ability to just kind of stumble onto exactly the right people she needs to talk to. I think that's what's going to happen in this next chapter. Yeah, I need to read the novelization of Jurassic Park. That would be fun. Hardy Boys and Nancy Drew do have crossovers. Yeah, they do. I just meant, like, if you crossed that over with Mystery Incorporated, and it was, like, all the teen detectives in one spot, that'd be kind of rad. Like when Mark Hamill voiced himself in Mystery Incorporated. Yeah, I've actually covered the Nancy Drew and Hardy Boys show, which crosses over with itself. Hardy Boys is also similar to Nancy Drew. Yeah, pretty much, exactly. No, you're good. I just said it weird, David. I was... Who do I think Nancy would get along with best out of all the Mystery Inc. members? Velma. They're kind of the same person. Do they fight each other in the crossover? No, Nancy has a giant crush on Frank, and they're kind of a power couple. In some of them, anyway. In others, they're just friends. Hardy Boys is a spin-off to Nancy Drew, I think, but male. I think technically Hardy Boys started being published a year before Nancy Drew. But very, very similar. I've only played Nancy Drew Secrets of the Old Clock by Her Interactive. This is this new restream. I'm glad that's cozy. They really are a power couple. They are. The Her Interactive, if you weren't in the chat before, I was just saying that soon I'm going to start launching a series of streaming through all the Nancy Drew games, because sometimes I cover them in my main videos. And I'm going to cover Message in a Haunted Mansion really soon, and then start streaming through all the Her Interactive games in order, because that's a dream of mine. And Secret of the Old Clock, I actually really enjoy that game. Yeah, I don't know if she's an exact spin-off of theirs, but yeah, it's something like that. I'll have to look it back up. In the games, it's only Ned. Yeah, in the older games, it's interesting because they almost, like, hint that Nancy Drew is into Frank. In, like, one of the games, like, there's a game where, like, she gets into, like, her hotel, and then, like, she and Ned have a big fight, and then, like, Frank is, like, there to, like, help her, and it's, like, hinted that they are into each other. It's interesting. Have I reviewed a Scooby-Doo Where Are You episode? I have. That's the original series, right? I covered the one with the clown. But yeah, Secret of the Old Clock, the game, is interesting because it's actually based on this book, as well as it takes inspiration. It borrows some things from The Hidden Staircase, which is the second Nancy Drew book in the series, and then also Mystery at Lilac Inn, which is the fourth book in the Nancy Drew series. Yeah, I did review that one episode. I should really review more, and I'm gonna review, it's newer Scooby-Doo, but Nancy Drew, Zombie Island. Anybody remember that movie? It's been on the request shelf for a long time. Secretly Old Clock, which would kind of work for a mystery game. No, it's Secret of the Old Clock. I just don't know how to speak. I'm sorry. Nancy Drew lore dump. Yeah, I'm sorry. I know way too much about Nancy Drew. It was a hyperfixation of mine and kind of still is. Ooh, you spilled milk on a DVD. I don't think I've ever done that. I definitely have dropped a few DVDs in my time. Alright, let's get into Chapter 5. Let's see who's screaming. Maybe it is a goat. Save Scooby-Doo Zombie Island for Halloween or autumn at least. That's fair. I might do that. Although I do have so many Halloween things to cover that, like, if it's not specifically, like, Halloween branded, I might get away with doing it earlier just for time's sake. That was the best version of Scooby-Doo. Yeah, I like the original. I like the early 2000s movies, like the Witch's Curse and Zombie Island, and then I like Mystery Incorporated just because it's super funny. Mystery Incorporated is super meta. Okay, sorry, I'm getting back to the book now. Chapter 5, A Surprising Story. Nancy froze behind the wheel. She had inadvertently hit someone? Her heart pounded. Had she inadvertently hit someone? Big distinction. Her heart pounding in fright, she opened the car door to step out. At the same instant, a shadowy figure arose from a pile of hay near her. I guess I must have scared you silly when I screamed, said a girl, Nancy's age, stepping forward. Yeah, usually that happens when somebody's screaming. You're alright? Nancy gasped. Yeah, I'm sorry I yelled. I came out here to check on our supply of feed for the chickens. I didn't think it was going to be a bad storm, so I didn't bother to go back into the house. Okay. It's pretty bad, Nancy said. Well, the storm terrified me, the girl continued. I didn't hear your car coming, and when it rushed in here, I panicked. That's fair, I guess. Nancy began to breathe normally again. Then told the stranger her name and the fact that the mechanism for raising the top of the convertible was not working. That's a shame, said the girl, and you must get your clothes dried. The storm is letting up. Let's dash over to the house. Grace will help you too. She's my sister. My name is Allison Hoover. Hoover? Nancy was tempted to tell Allison that she had been planning to call, but she decided not to mention it at the moment. It might be better to do her sleuthing more subtly. So she just stumbles across this house. Like, literally just stumbles across the random person that she wanted to talk to. Wild. Nancy smiled at Allison. Thanks a million, but first I'd like to wipe out the car. Are there any rags around the barn? Allison produced several, and together the two girls mopped the water from the cushions and floor. By this time, the rain had stopped. As Nancy and Allison sloshed through a series of puddles to the farmhouse, Nancy had better chance to study her companion. She was tall with reddish blonde hair and very fair skin. Her voice was musical, and she had an attractive, lilting laugh. The girls reached the run-down farmhouse and stamped the mud from their shoes on the back porch. Then Allison flung open the door, and they entered cheerfully into a kitchen. As the door shut behind them, another girl who was just closing the oven of an old-fashioned range turned towards them in surprise. Grace! I've brought a visitor, Allison said, quickly. Nancy, I want you to meet my sister. She's the mainstay of our family of two. Grace Hoover cordially acknowledged the introduction and greeted Nancy with a warm smile. Nancy judged her to be at least 4 years older than Allison. Her face was rather serious, and it was evident from her manner that responsibility had fallen on her shoulders at an early age. Nancy was attracted to both girls and responded to their friendly welcome. She put on a robe, which Allison brought her, and Grace hung her wet clothes near the range. Presently, Grace pulled an ironing board from a closet with the intention of pressing Nancy's garments. But Nancy would not hear of this and began to iron them herself. This is fun, she said to the sisters. I don't know what I would have done without you girls. It's great for us, Allison spoke up. We don't have much company. To tell you the truth, we can't afford it. Aw, that's so sad. Grace stepped up to the stove, removed a golden brown cake from the oven, and set it on the table to cool. But today we're not talking about money. It's Allison's birthday, and this is a birthday cake, Nancy. If you're not in too much hurry, I wish you'd join us for a little celebration. Why, I'd love to, Nancy said. Grace's cakes are yummy, Allison declared. I'm not much of a cook myself. My department is taking care of the barn and the chickens. Soon Nancy finished pressing her clothes and put them back on. Meanwhile, the cake had cooled, and Grace started to spread the chocolate frosting. Suppose you two go into the living room and wait, she suggested. I'll bring the cake and tea. Nancy followed Allison to the adjoining room. Although it was comfortable, the room did not contain much furniture. The floor had been painted and was scantily covered with handmade rag. And was scantily covered with handmade rag rugs. With the exception of an old-fashioned sofa, an inexpensive table, a few straight-back chairs, and an old oil stove, which furnished heat in cold weather, there was little else in the room. However, dainty white curtains covered the windows, and Nancy realized that although the Hoovers were poor, they had tried hard to make their home attractive. Do you two girls live here alone all the time? Nancy inquired. Allison nodded. Grace and I have been living here since Father died. That was 2 years ago. Mother passed away just before that, the girls added with a slight catch in their voice. Their illness took every penny we had. I'm terribly sorry, Nancy remarked sympathetically. It must be dreadfully hard for you two girls to run the farm by yourselves. Our farm isn't as large as it once was, Allison said quietly. We have only a few acres left. I know you are too polite to ask how we manage, Nancy. Grace helps as a dressmaker at Masonville when she can get work. She makes all her own clothes, and mine too, and I raise chickens. From just beyond the doorway suddenly came the strains of Happy Birthday to You, but this time Nancy had joined in, and she and Grace finished Day to You, Happy Birthday, dear Allison, Happy Birthday to You. Grace set the cake with 18 lighted candles on the table. She and Nancy sang the second verse with words, "May you have many, many more." Tears stood in Allison's eyes. When the song ended, she grasped her sister with a tremendous hug. Then she gave Nancy one. This is the nicest birthday I've had in years," she quavered. "And it's one of the most enjoyable I've ever attended," Nancy said sincerely. Suddenly, Allison began to sing a tuneful old English ballad about the birthday of a village lass. Nancy listened, entranced to Allison's clear, bell-like tones. When she finished, Nancy applauded, then said, "That was perfectly lovely. You have a beautiful voice, Allison." The singer laughed gaily. "Thank you, Nancy. I've always wanted to take lessons, but as you know, voice training is pretty expensive." At the moment, Grace brought a tray of fragrant tea. As she poured 3 cups, Allison blew out the candles and served the cake. She did not sever the cake. That would be gruesome. "I've never tasted anything more delicious in all my life," Nancy said enthusiastically. The 3 girls chatted like old friends. Finally, the sun broke through the clouds. As Nancy rose to leave, she noticed an unusual picture on the wall opposite her and commented on its beauty. "Uncle Josiah Crowley gave it to us," Allison told her. "If he were only alive now, things would be different." At the mention of the name, Nancy sat down again. Was she going to pick up a clue to the possibility that Mr. Crowley had made a later will? "He wasn't really our uncle," Grace explained, "but we loved him as much as though he were a relative." Her voice broke, and for a moment she could not go on. Then, gaining control of herself, she continued, "He lived on the farm next to us. That was when Mother and Father were alive. All of Allison's and my misfortunes seemed to come all at once." "He was the dearest man you ever saw," Allison said. "Some people thought him queer, but we never minded his peculiar ways after you knew him. Uncle Josiah was very good to us, always told me that he'd back me in a singing career." "Yes," Grace added, "Uncle Josiah used to say Allison sang as sweetly as birds and wanted to pay for lessons with a famous teacher, but after he went to live with the Tophams, he never said any more about it." "He never liked it with the Tophams, though," Allison declared. "They weren't kind to him, and he used to slip away to visit us. Uncle Josiah often said that we seemed like his own children," Grace spoke up. "He brought us many nice gifts, but we loved him for himself and not his money. I remember, though, the very last day we saw him alive, he told us, 'I have planned a big surprise to make you girls happy, but I can't tell you now what it is. You'll see it in my will.' Those were his very words. And then the Tophams got everything," Allison said. "He must have changed his mind for some reason. It's hard to believe he would forget his promise to us," Grace said sadly. "Oh, wouldn't it be wonderful if a later will could be found?" Allison exclaimed. "Yes," Nancy replied. "I've heard that Mr. Crowley told other people he was leaving money to them. The Turner sisters, for instance. Do you know them?" "Slightly," Grace answered. "My dad," Nancy went on, "is a lawyer. He and I are very much interested in this case. He even mentioned you girls, and to tell the truth, I was on my way here to talk to you." Allison impulsively grasped Nancy's arm. "You say your father is a lawyer? Grace and I are positive Uncle Josiah made a later will. Oh, if we could only engage your father to help us prove this." Then a sad look came over her face. "But I'm forgetting. We wouldn't have any money to pay him, and we should lose the case." "Don't let that worry you," said Nancy kindly. "This is your birthday, and you must be happy, Allison. My special wish for you is that before you're 1 year older, you'll inherit some of the Crowley money, so that you can take care of those singing lessons." End of chapter. Alright. The poor sisters, by the way. They just really are having a rough time of it, don't you think? Those were the days. Show up in a barn, get free birthday cake. Yep. Yeah, very different time, Nancy Drew, isn't it? No wonder they called it the Great Depression. Everyone's got a sob story. Everyone's going through it in this book. Everyone is broke, and everyone needs money. Not too unlike 2022, but you know. Oh, do you need... should the rain... I can turn the rain down a little bit. Hope Nancy, when they find the second will, says at the end, when there's a will, there's a way, right? Missed opportunity. So yeah, basically... This is the girl's story is very similar to the first. Like, everybody's like, yeah, Josiah was gonna give us money, he was a really nice guy, and then he fell in with the wrong crowd, pretty much, and gave us nothing. Yeah. So Uncle Josiah, or Josiah Crowley. Rain sounds more like static. I can turn it down. I could also pick a different one. We could do a different rain sound. This one is like rain on a window. Is that any better? Nancy Drew meets Roger Rabbit. Pretty much, yeah. It's thousands of people peeing, not rain at all. Why did you have to give me that image? Better? Yeah, I like that one better too. Yeah, so the girls are like, most people thought Josiah Crowley was really eccentric, but we loved him, and we didn't care about his money, and then he didn't give us any of his money, which kind of sucks. Like, no one likes the Tophams, pretty much. Oh, are we talking about Mystery Incorporated? Yeah, I'm behind on the chat. Sorry. Oh, so yeah. Everybody is going through the depression. Except for the Tophams, who are high-rolling. Great choice for ASMR sound. Good. I like it. Whose is this? Let me shout. Since I'm borrowing their rain sounds, I don't want to not... This is relaxing ambience ASMR. Rain sounds on window with thunder sounds. So, yeah. What kind of cake was it? I think it was like a yellow cake with chocolate frosting. Sounds awesome. Oh, yeah. So I'm just taking a minute for a second. Just taking a break. To focus on the chat for a second. Getting caught up. I like vanilla cake. My favorite, honestly, I love chocolate cake with chocolate frosting because I just love chocolate, but like chocolate cake with cream cheese frosting, that's where it's at. CBD cake. That's highly plausible. Depression is a pandemic itself, forget COVID. That's the truth right there. So I'll probably end up reading a few more chapters tonight, and then we'll finish it in a later stream. Just a heads up. It's... Oh, it's 9. I've been on for 2 hours now? Chocolate and red velvet is very good. Oh god. No. Urinal cake is the worst kind to serve to guests. Yep. Yep. That's accurate. Red velvet is pretty underrated. Alright. Oh my gosh. Okay, so yeah, let me keep reading. I'll probably read a couple more chapters, and then sign off for the night. And we will do another stream probably tomorrow night or the night after, maybe. Yeah. So yeah. So everybody's on the same page. How many pages is the book? I think it's like 180. We're about 50 pages in right now. I love your videos. Thank you. Do you have Insta? Yeah, I'm someone called Avery. Just someone called Avery. It's 2 a.m. here, so hey! Thanks for staying up to hang out. So yeah, everybody seemed kind of judgy of Josiah, right? But he seemed pretty chill. Everybody was like, yeah, he was a weird old man. Yeah, no, so this book is actually 3 books in one. That's why it looks super long, but, like, the book that I'm working on right now is about... It's this. This right here is the whole of the book. Okay. 2:05 in the UK. Hey! Hello. Maybe actually join tomorrow or the next day. All of the VODs will be available, just in case anybody's wondering. If you go to the homepage of my channel, there's a pinned thing that says, like, past streams. And yeah. If you go there and you just look, because I always make sure that the VODs are listed as unlisted so that they're not, like, cluttering the main feed, but, there's always time for Avery. Thank you, that's so sweet. So yeah, if you ever want to watch, like, old VODs back, like, if you care to hear commentary on the rest of this book and you're not there for the stream, it'll be there. It'll all be right there, so... I have to bake tomorrow, that's so cool. Dream streams. Yeah, it's just a big... I have a playlist that is only gonna have 2 videos on it that just says, past lives, and you can just go back and watch any of the VODs. What do you like to bake? I love to bake. My favorite is just Toll House cookies, but without the walnuts, because I'm allergic, so they're basically just chocolate chip cookies with a bachelor's degree. There's something else I wanted to say about this chapter, but I forget. Where was it? Where was I? My dad's really good at baking bread. He makes, like, the best homemade bread I've ever had. Sorry, I'm just re-reviewing this chapter. I'm getting distracted all over again. The Last Chocolate Chunk is my favorite. Yeah. Yeah. I use just regular chocolate chips, but I've, like, gotten this one particular recipe down to a science. Okay, I'm ready to start reading chapter 6 if everybody's ready. How many people do we have in the stream right now? $11. Nice, thank you guys. Alright, sorry, I'll get back on track. I'm getting distracted with parts of the book that I've already read. Chapter 6. An exciting appointment. The Hoover girls walked out to the barn with Nancy. "Do come to see us again," Grace called, as the young detective climbed into her car. "Yes, please do," Allison added. Nancy promised that she would. "As soon as I have some news," she said. Although the weather had cleared, the river road remained muddy and slippery. Nancy found it necessary to drive with extreme care for the next 2 miles until she reached the main highway. No wonder River Road isn't used much, she thought. And how did Grace and Allison get to town? Nancy wondered. She had not seen a car at the Hoover home and knew that no bus passed their door. I certainly wish, she thought, that I or somebody else could locate a later will of Josiah Crowley's, by which the Hoovers and the Turners would receive some much-needed money. I must tell Dad about this latest development. She decided to see if her father was in his office, and drove directly there. Nancy parked the car in a nearby lot. She surveyed the convertible ruefully as she climbed out. Poor thing, it certainly needs a bath. Nancy found Mr. Drew. Didn't it just get caught in the rain? Isn't that... I feel like the car would be very clean. I guess just because of the mud. Anyway. Nancy found Mr. Drew in. As she entered his private office, he arose from the desk chair to kiss her. "I'm glad you're here, and safe," the lawyer said. "I was worried about you when that violent storm came up. When Hannah phoned me that you weren't back, I began to regret that I'd seen you on the errand." His daughter grinned. "I'm back all in one piece. I delivered the papers to Judge Hart, and I learned that he and his wife saw Mr. Crowley in Masonville a couple of times. Also, I talked to the Hoover girls." She described her meeting with Allison and Grace, and ended up asking her father if he could help them. "From what you say, it does look as if Josiah Crowley might have made another will which included them as beneficiaries," Mr. Drew commented thoughtfully. "I'll be glad to do anything I can to help the Hoover girls." He asked whether the sisters had given Nancy any specific information about Crawley's habits or other helpful clues. When she shook her head, Mr. Drew suggested that she invited the girls to his office for a little conference. "Perhaps if I ask them some questions, it will recall helpful incidents," the lawyer studied his desk calendar for a moment, then looked up at his daughter. "How about tomorrow afternoon at 2:45? I can give them about half an hour." For answer, Nancy gave her father a hug and then asked if she might use the telephone to call the Hoovers at once. Grace and Allison eagerly accepted the Drews' invitation, and Nancy said she would drive out to bring them to the conference and take them home afterwards. "You're a doll," Allison, who had answered the telephone, said. "Nancy, I just know you're going to solve this mystery." Suddenly, the idea came to Nancy. She asked Allison how long the girls would be able to stay in River Heights. "Oh, as long as you need us," Allison replied. "Good. Then I'd like you both to stay and have supper with us," Nancy said. "Sorry, I can't join you," Mr. Drew told his daughter as she hung up. "I have dinner engagements and a conference in the evening." Just then, the mayor of River Heights was shown into the lawyer's office, and Nancy arose to leave. Wow, they are connected. She spoke to the mayor for a moment, then said, "See you later, Dad." Just casually chilling with the mayor. Before Nancy returned home, she stopped at an old-fashioned house on the side street. It was a home of Signor, I hope I say his name right, Mascagni? He is Italian, this character, I believe. A famous voice teacher who had retired to the small city the year before, but took few outstanding pupils. Nancy introduced himself to the white, bushy-haired, florid-faced man, and then said, "Signor Mascagni, would you be willing to listen to the voice of a friend of mine and give her your honest opinion, or whether or not she might become a great singer? Whether or not she might become a great singer. If she might, and she can obtain the money for lessons, would you be able to take her as a pupil?" Signor Mascagni studied Nancy for several minutes before replying. So he stared at her for several minutes before replying? Finally, he said, "You do not look like the kind of girl who would come here on a foolish errand. Ordinarily, I do not accept beginners, but in this case, I would be willing to hear your friend sing." He laughed. "Mind you, I will give you nothing but the truth, and if your friend does not measure up, I hope her feelings will not be too hurt too deeply." Like a Simon Cowell type of judge, I guess. Nancy laughed too. "I like honesty," she said. "As a matter of fact, this girl knows nothing about what I'm asking you. Coming here will be a complete surprise to her. I'm probably no judge of voices, but I think she's a natural. However, we will both appreciate having your opinion, and will certainly abide by it." She arranged for a meeting the following afternoon, and at 4 o'clock, she left Signor Mascagni's house in an excited mood. "Maybe I've gone way out on a limb," Nancy mused, "but this is another one of those hunches of mine, and Dad talks about it, and I must carry it through." When she picked up the Hoovers the following day, Nancy did not mention the appointment with the voice teacher. The three girls went directly to Mr. Drew's office, and at once had begun to quiz Grace and Allison about Mr. Crowley. "I understand that he was rather an eccentric man," the lawyer began. "Suppose you tell me everything you can remember about what Josiah Crowley did and what he said, which would help us figure out where he might have secreted a later will." "Uncle Josiah was rather absent-minded," Grace spoke up. "I often saw him hunting for his spectacles, which he had pushed up onto his head." "Did he ever hide things?" Mr. Drew asked. "Oh, yes," Allison laughed. "Uncle Josiah was always putting articles away in what he called a safe place. But the places were so safe, he never could find the things again." Then, Nancy spoke up excitedly, "Mr. Crowley could have hidden a will and then forgotten where." "I suppose so," Grace replied. "While living with the Tophams, I'm sure that's just what he would have done. One day, when he was calling at our home, he talked about the Tophams and the way they were trying to get all of his money. I guess they think just because I stay on, that they're going to get everything. But they'll be fooled when they find I've made another will," he said, with an odd little chuckle. "This time I'm not going to trust it to any lawyer. I'll put it away in a place that I know will be safe." Allison asked Mr. Drew, "Do you think Uncle Josiah hid another will somewhere in the Topham's house?" The lawyer looked down at his desk for several seconds before replying, "If he did, we would have a great fight on our hands, I'm afraid, trying to persuade the Tophams to let us make a search." Another thought had come to Nancy, and she shuddered at the idea. Perhaps the Tophams had been alerted by all the talk of a lighter will, and had searched for it, discovering one, and by now destroyed it. She flashed her father a questioning look, and got the impression that he had the same thoughts. But there was no point in discouraging the Hoover girls by telling them this. Mr. Drew continued to question the sisters until 3:30, and then said he had another appointment. He would do all he could to help the girls, and would not charge them for his services. Pro bono work, if you will. "Unless they bring results," he added with a smile. "You're very kind, just like your daughter, so not pro bono work." Grace said as she arose and shook hands with the lawyer. "You have no idea how much Alice and I appreciate what you're doing for us." When the three girls reached Nancy's car, she told the sisters she wanted them to meet someone special in town, and drove directly to Signor Mascagni's home. I'm so scared of messing that pronunciation up. As they went up to the front porch, they could hear the sounds of a soprano voice singing an aria from Tosca. "How beautiful!" Allison exclaimed softly. The girls were admitted by a maid and asked to wait in a small room while Signor Mascagni's pupil finished her lesson. Puzzled, Allison waited for Nancy to explain. "I have a surprise for you," Nancy said with a grin. "Signor Mascagni has promised to listen to your voice. If you pass the test, he'll consider taking you on as a pupil. That is after we find the money for your voice lessons." Allison was too dumbfounded to speak, but Grace cried out, "Oh, Nancy, what are you going to do next? We've known you only 24 hours and you've already boosted our morale sky high." At this moment, the door to the studio opened. The young soprano came out, followed by Signor Mascagni. He said goodbye to his pupil and then invited the three callers into the studio. Nancy quickly introduced the Hoover sisters. "And you are the singer?" the man said, almost at once, addressing Allison. "I can tell from your speaking voice." Apparently the teacher sensed that Allison had been taken by surprise and was a little nervous. Accordingly, he began to talk on other subjects than music. He showed the girls several paintings in the room and pieces of statuary which had come from Italy. "I prize them highly," he said. "They are exquisite," Allison remarked. Signor Mascagni walked to a rear window and pointed out a lovely garden in back of the house. Then, evidently satisfied that Allison was at ease, he led the way to the grand piano and sat down. "Now, what would you like to sing?" he asked Allison with a smile. "Please stand right here, facing me." "Something very simple," she replied. "America the Beautiful?" The teacher nodded, asked her what key she would like it in and played it, and then began to accompany her. Very patriotic choice. Allison sang as though inspired. Her voice sounded even more beautiful than it had at the farmhouse, Nancy thought. When Allison finished the song, Signor Mascagni made no comment. Instead, he asked her to try a scale, then to sing single tones, jumping from octave to octave. "You have a very fine range, Miss Hoover," was his only comment. For half an hour, he had Allison try short songs in various keys, and at one point joined her in a duet. At last he turned around on the piano bench and faced Nancy and Grace. "I believe," he said slowly, "I believe that someday we shall know Allison Hoover as an operatic star." Before the girls could say anything, he jumped up and turned to shake Allison's hand fervently. By this time, the full import of his words had dawned on the young singer. Tears began to roll down her cheeks. "Bravissimo, bravissimo," he exclaimed. You sing, you cry, you smile. Magnifico. You will also be a dramatic actress. Splendida. Sorry, if anybody speaks Italian. I'm terrible at Italian. Nancy and Grace were nearly on the verge of tears also. They were so overwhelmed by the happy news. Then suddenly, the three girls became serious, remembering that there was still the problem of money for lessons from this great man. They knew his fee per hour must be very high. Allison suddenly began to talk and poured out her whole story to the white-haired teacher. But I know, she declared with a brave smile, that somehow I'm going to get the money for the lessons, and I wouldn't want to take them from anybody but you, Signor Mascagni. I'll come back to you just as soon as I can. I thank you very, very much. Please, girls, I'd like to leave now. As Allison rushed toward the front door, Signor Mascagni detained Nancy and Grace. This Allison, she is wonderful, he exclaimed. I want to give her lessons to see her train and see that her training is correct. He threw up his hands and shook his head. But I cannot afford to give the lessons free. Perhaps I could cut my price. We'll find the money somehow, Signor. Nancy promised. Then she and Grace thanked the teacher and followed Allison outside. At the Drew home that evening, there were mixed emotions on everyone's part. Hannah Gruen had taken a great fancy to the Hoover sisters, and the news of Allison's talent had thrilled her, as well as the girls. Conversations at supper had, as well as the... Wait, I've lost my place, I'm so sorry. So the conversations at supper were gay and animated. Nancy and Mrs. Gruen drove the sisters to their farm, and on parting, Nancy again promised to do all she could to help find a will from which the girls might possibly benefit. But figuring out how to do this became a problem that seemed insurmountable to Nancy. At breakfast the following day, Mr. Drew suggested, Nancy, perhaps if you give your mind a little rest from the Crowley matter, an inspiration about the case might come to you. His daughter smiled. Good idea, Dad. I think I'll take a walk in the fresh air and clear the cobwebs from my brain. As soon as she finished eating, Nancy set out in a brisk pace. She headed for River Heights' attractive park view to view the display of roses, which was, wow, I'm struggling, sorry. There's a picture. This is the girls meeting with the music teacher. And I believe this over here is the one that is Allison. Okay. As soon as she finished eating, Nancy set out at a brisk pace. She headed for River Heights' attractive park to view the display of roses, which was always very beautiful. She had gone only a short distance along one of the paths when she caught sight of Isabel and Ada Topham, seated on a bench not far ahead. They're the last people in the world I want to see right now, Nancy thought. They'll probably say something mean to me and I'll lose my temper. When I think how Grace and Allison and the Turners could use just 1/10 of the Crowley money, which the Tophams are going to inherit, I could just burst. Nancy had paused, wondering whether she should turn back. No, she told herself, I'll go to see the roses. I'll take that path back of the Tophams and they won't notice me. Nancy made her way along quietly, with no intention of eavesdropping on one of the two girls, but suddenly the two words of their conversation came to her ears, bringing Nancy to an involuntary halt. She had distinctly heard Isabel say, the will. In a flash, Nancy's detective instincts were aroused, and her heart pounded excitedly. It must be Josiah Crowley's will they're talking about, she reasoned. End of chapter. Oh, right. What did I miss in chat? Almost didn't recognize me without the glasses. Yeah, the glasses are very prominent. What are my go-to snacks? Depends. You know when people ask things like that and you all of a sudden forget, like, every snack you've ever had? I love when I bake these big batches of cookies and then I just have them not a super healthy snack, but a very good snack. Avery's ADD seems worse than mine. I'm so sorry. My ADHD is absolutely through the roof. I'm also kind of struggling just because it's not like Nancy Drew is written in Old English or anything, but they definitely had a very different way of speaking. And, you know, words change through time. So, like, trying to, like, formulate the sentences in my brain is, like, struggling. I'm struggling a little bit, but, you know, doing the best I can. What is this, the X Factor? This is X Factor 1930s edition. Simon Cowell isn't there to yell at you, though. Nothing creepy about staring at someone without talking for a long period of time. Exactly. It said he stared at her for several minutes. Can you imagine? Can you imagine asking somebody a question and them just staring at you for like 3 or 4 minutes before responding? I'd be terrified. My eyesight is so bad that the illustration looked like Pyramid Head from Seinfeld's teacher. To be fair, I think part of it is just that you're kind of far away from the lens. I don't know how well anybody can see, but... Yep. That's that. My reading is fine. Definitely better than mine. Thank you. Yeah, I'm doing my best. I haven't read this book in years. Nancy's totally listening on purpose. Oh yeah, for sure. Because she hates gossip, remember? Yeah. Working my way along. This book is also kind of old, and it's printed in such a way that, like, certain words are kind of, I can't find one now, but some of them are a little unintelligible the way that they're printed. It's just kind of printed wonky. And they just have kind of like a... I don't know how you would describe it. It's not old English or anything, but it's definitely, like, the way that their vocabulary is, like... It's not the way we talk now, so my brain is like, what? Oh my gosh. So we are 6 chapters down. I think I might... I don't know. What time is it? I might hop off now, and we'll just do more reading in a stream soon. If that's cool with everybody. Yeah. Sorry, I'm trying to get caught up on the chat because I can't read both of them. Read and read the chat at the same time. Cool by you. Yeah, thank you guys for chilling out. I don't know... How are we feeling about reading streams? Is it something that we're liking, or... Do we like half asleep, calming? Oh, I'm glad it's calming. I hope that everything on this channel is positive and calming. Yeah, I'm gonna hop off and go to bed. Yeah. Thank you guys so much for hanging out. So relaxing. Good. Yeah, I really like the idea of doing more of these streams. I'm gonna do my best, as long as I'm able to do a a tomorrow night stream. Put the video on your page. All the VODs of any, like, stream that I do, this is only my second one, but any in the future, they're unlisted, but they're in a pinned playlist on the homepage of this channel. So if you ever go to the homepage, it's just like past live streams and they'll all be there. So that's where you'll find this. So yeah, I'm gonna sign off for right now. When we come back for the next stream, we will be starting chapter 7. It's called The Angry Dog. I don't remember what's in chapter 7, but it's probably going to be intense. This chapter is so... These books are so unnecessarily intense, I forgot. But, thank you guys for being here to help me try out something new. I'm glad to be talking about books for once. And yeah, I'll see you guys soon. Hope everybody has a really good night. Good night, everybody. Bye. They're nice and cozy. Your videos usually drop on working, so it's nice to have one in the background. That's good. I'm glad that people think they're cozy and not boring. I'll talk to you guys soon. I appreciate you guys. Bye.